So we're back with The Restaurant at the End of the Universe by Douglas Adams. We're halfway through this, so if you haven't caught up to the story with us, you might want to start at the beginning. Also, this is a sequel to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so I also read that book on this channel if you want to go back and watch those videos. Where I struggle with my dyslexia and get through this. So, yes, anyway, actually I feel like this channel's been helping me a lot with my dyslexia, because reading out loud makes it to where it has to make sense, if that makes sense. So it's like I have to be more thoughtful. Anyway, without further ado, let's get on with it. Ford and Zaphod looked and passed on. "And this, baby," said Ford, "the tangerine star buggy with the black sunbusters." Again, the star buggy was a small ship, a totally misnamed one, in fact, because the one thing it couldn't manage was interstellar distances. Basically, it was a sporty planet hopper, dolled up to look like something it wasn't. Nice lines, though. They passed on. The next one was a big one, and 30 yards long, a coach limo ship, and obviously designed with one aim in mind, that of making the beholder sick with envy. The paintwork and accessory detail clearly said, "Not only am I rich enough to afford this ship, I am also rich enough not to take it seriously." It was wonderfully hideous. "Just look at it," said Zaphod. "Multi-cluster quark drive perspex running boards, got to be the Laszlo Lyricon custom job." He examined every inch. "Yes," he said. "Look, the infra-pink lizard emblem on the neutrino cowling, Laszlo's trademark. The man has no shame." "I was passed by one of these mothers once, out by the Axel Nebula," said Ford. "I was out going flat out, and this thing just strolled past me, star drive hardly ticking over. Just incredible." Zaphod whistled appreciatively. 10 seconds later," said Ford, "it smashed straight into the third moon of Jaglon Beta. You're right." "Amazing looking ship, though. Looks like a fish, moves like a fish, steers like a cow." Ford looked around the other side. "Hey, come see," he called out. "There's a big mural painted on this side. A bursting sun, disaster area's trademark. This must be hot black ship. Look, you old bugger. They do this terrible song, you know, which ends with the stunt ship crashing into the sun. Meant to be an amazing spectacle. Expensive in stunt ships, though." Zaphod's attention, however, was elsewhere. His attention was riveted on the ship standing next to hot black Desiato's limo. His mouth hung open. "That," he said, "that is really bad for the eyes." Ford looked. He too stood astonished. It was a ship of classic simple design, like flattened salmon, 20 yards long, very clean, very sleek. There was just one remarkable thing about it. "It's so black," said Ford Prefect. "You can hardly make out its shape. Light just seems to fall into it." Zaphod said nothing. He had simply fallen in love. The blackness of it was so extreme that it was almost impossible to tell how close you were standing to it. "Your eyes just slide off it," said Ford, in wonder. It was an emotional moment. He bit his lip. Zaphod moved forward to it, slowly, like a man possessed, or more accurately, like a man who wanted to possess. His hands reached out to stroke it. His hand stopped. His hand reached out to stroke it again, and his hand stopped again. "Come and feel the surface," he said. in a hushed voice. Ford put his hand out to feel it. His hand stopped. You can't, he said. See, said Zaphod. It's just totally frictionless. This must be one mother of a mover. He turned to look at Ford seriously. At least one of his heads did. The other stayed gazing in awe at the ship. What do you reckon, Ford? He said. You mean, Ford looked over his shoulder. You mean stroll off with it? You think we should? No, nor do I. But I think we're going to, aren't we? How can we not? They gazed a little longer till Zaphod suddenly pulled himself together. We better shift soon, he said. In a moment or so the universe will have ended and all the captain creeps will be pouring down here to find their Borgmobiles. Zaphod, said Ford. Yeah? How do we do it? Simple, said Zaphod. He turned. Marvin, he called. Slowly, laboriously, and with a million little clanking and creaking noises that he had learned to simulate, Marvin turned around to answer the summons. Come on over here, said Zaphod. We've got a job for you. Marvin trudged toward them. I won't enjoy it, he said. Yes, you will, enthused Zaphod. There's a whole new life stretching out ahead of you. Oh, not another one, moaned Marvin. Will you shut up and listen, hissed Zaphod. This time there's going to be excitement and adventure and really wild things. Sounds awful, Marvin said. Marvin, all I'm trying to ask you, I suppose you want me to open this spaceship for you. What, yes. Yeah, that's right, said Zaphod jumpily. He was keeping at least 3 eyes on the entrance. Time was short. Well, I wish you'd just tell me rather than try to engage my enthusiasm, said Marvin, because I haven't got one. He walked on up to the ship, touched it, and a hatchway swung open. Ford and Zaphod stared at the opening. Don't mention it, said Marvin. Oh, you didn't. He trudged away again. Arthur and Trillian clustered around. What's happening? Asked Arthur. Well, look at this, said Ford. Look at the interior of this ship. Weirder and weirder, breathed Zaphod. It's black, said Ford. Everything in it is just totally black. In the restaurant, things were fast approaching the moment after which there wouldn't be any more moments. All eyes were fixed on the dome, other than those of Hot Black Desiato's bodyguard, which were looking intently at Hot Black Desiato, and those of Hot Black Desiato himself, which the bodyguard had closed out of respect. The bodyguard leaned over the table. Had Hot Black Desiato been alive, he probably would have deemed this a good moment to lean back, or even go for a short walk. His bodyguard was not a man who improved with proximity. On account of his unfortunate condition, however, Hot Black Desiato remained totally inert. Mr. Desiato, sir, whispered the bodyguard whenever he spoke. It looked as if the muscles on either side of his mouth were clamoring over each other to get out of the way. Mr. Desiato, can you hear me? Hot Black Desiato quite naturally said nothing. Hot Black, hissed the bodyguard. Again, quite naturally, Hot Black Desiato did not reply. Supernaturally, however, he did. On the table in front of him, a wine glass rattled, and a fork rose an inch or so and tapped against the glass. It settled on the table again. The bodyguard gave a satisfied grunt. "It's time we were going, Mr. Desiato," muttered the bodyguard. "Don't want to get caught in the rush. Not in your condition. You want to get to the next gig nice and relaxed." There was a really big audience for it. One of the best. Kakrafoon, 576,002 million years ago. You will have been looking forward to it. The fork rose again, paused, waggled in a non-committal sort of way, and dropped again. "Oh, come on." Sorry, I almost yawned there. It was a weird, hesitant yawn. "Oh, come on," said the bodyguard. "It's going to have been great. You knocked him cold." The bodyguard would have given Dr. Dan Street Mentioner an apoplectic attack. The black ships going into the sun always gets him, and the new one's a beauty. Be real sorry to see it go. If we get on down there, I'll get the black ship autopilot, and we'll cruise off in the limo, okay? I told you it was a hesitant yawn. It was coming for me. The fork tapped once in agreement, and the glass of wine mysteriously emptied itself. The bodyguard wheeled Hot Black Desiato's chair out of the restaurant. "And now," cried Max from the center of the stage, "the moment you've all been waiting for." He flung his arms into the air behind him. The band went into a frenzy of percussion and rolling synthochords. Max had argued with them about this, but they'd claimed it was their contract. That's what they would do. His agent would have to sort it out. "The skies begin to boil," he cried. "Nature collapses into the screaming void in 20 seconds' time. The universe itself will be at an end. See where the light of infinity bursts in upon us." The hideous fury of destruction blazed about them, and at that moment a still small trumpet sounded from an infinite distance. Max's eyes swiveled round to glare at the band. None of them seemed to be playing a trumpet. Suddenly, a wisp of smoke was swirling and shimmering on the stage next to him. The trumpet was joined by more trumpets, over 500 times. Max had done this show, and nothing like this had ever happened before. He drew back in alarm from the swirling smoke, and as he did so, a figure slowly materialized inside, the figure of an ancient man, bearded, robed, and wreathed in light. In his eyes were stars, and on his brow a golden crown. "What's this?" whispered Max, wild-eyed. "What's happening?" At the back of the restaurant, the stony-faced party from the Church of the Second Coming of the Great Prophet Zarquon leapt ecstatically to their feet, chanting and crying. Max blinked in amazement. He threw up his arms to the audience. "A big hand, please, ladies and gentlemen," he hollered, "for the Great Prophet Zarquon. He has come! Zarquon has come again." Thunderous applause broke out as Max strode across the stage and handed his microphone to the prophet. Zarquon coughed. He peered around at the assembled gathering. The stars in his eyes twinkled uneasily. He handled the microphone with confusion. He said. "Hello? Look, I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I've had the most ghastly time. All sorts of things cropping up at the last moment." He seemed nervous of the expectant awed hush. He cleared his throat. How are we for time? He said. Have I just got a minute? And so the universe ended. Chapter 19. One of the major selling points of the wholly remarkable travel book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, apart from its relative cheapness and the fact that it has the words "Don't Panic" written in large friendly letters across its cover, is its compendious and occasionally accurate glossary. The statistics relating to the geosocial nature of the universe, for instance, are deftly set out between pages 9 and 38,324 and 938,326. And the simplistic style in which they were written is partly explained by the fact that the editors, having to meet a publishing deadline, copied the information off the back of a packet of breakfast cereal, hastily embroidered it with a few footnotes in order to avoid prosecution under the incomprehensibly torturous galactic copyright laws. It is interesting to note that a later and wilier editor sent the book backward in time through a temporal warp and then successfully sued the breakfast cereal company for infringement of the same laws. That's funny. Here is a sample. The universe, some information to help you live in it. 1. Area, infinite. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy offers this definition of the word infinite. Infinite, bigger than the biggest thing ever, and then some. Much bigger than that, in fact, really amazingly immense, a totally stunning size, real, wow, that's a big time, infinity. Is just so big that by comparison, bigness itself looks really titchy. Gigantic multiplied by colossal multiplied by staggeringly huge is the sort of concept we're trying to get across here. 2. Imports. None. It is impossible to import things into an infinite area, there being no outside to import things from. Exports. None. See imports. Oh, that was number 3, sorry. 4. Population. None. It is known that there are an infinite number of worlds simply because there is an infinite amount of space for them to be in. However, not every one of them is inhabited. Therefore, there must be a finite number of inhabited worlds. Any finite number divided by infinity is as near to nothing as makes no odds, so the average population of all the planets in the universe can be said to be 0. From this, it follows that the population of the whole universe is also 0, and that any people you may meet from time to time are merely the products of a deranged imagination. 5. Monetary units. None. In fact, there are 3 freely convertible currencies in the galaxy, but none of them counts. The Altarian dollar has recently collapsed. The Flanian Pobblebeat is only exchangeable for other Flanian Pobblebeats, and the Triganic poo has its own very special problems. Its exchange rate is of 8 ningus to 1 poo is simple enough, but since a ningi is a triangular rubber coin 6,800 miles along each side, no one has ever collected enough to own 1 poo. Ningus are not negotiable currency because the galactobanks refused to deal in fiddling small change. From this basic premise, it is very simple to prove that the galactobanks are also products of a deranged imagination. 6. Art. None. The function of art is to hold the mirror up to nature, and there simply isn't a mirror big enough. See point 1. 7. Sex. None. Well, in fact, there's an awful lot of this, largely because of the total lack of money, trade, banks, art, or anything else that might keep all the non-existent people of the universe occupied. However, it is not worth embarking on a long discussion of it now because it really is terribly complicated. For further information, see Guide, Chapter 7, 9, 10, 11, 14, 16, 17, 19, 21 to 84 inclusive, and in fact most of the rest of the guide. Hold up. Chapter 20. Hold on, I've gotta hydrate. The restaurant continued existing, but everything else had stopped. Temporal relatistics held it and protected it in a nonetheless that oh wait, hold on, let me redo this chapter. Hold on. The restaurant continued existing, but everything else had stopped. Temporal relatistics held it and protected it in a nothingness. Sorry, that wasn't merely a vacuum. It was simply nothing. There was nothing in which a vacuum could be said to exist. The force-shielded dome had once again been rendered opaque. The party was over. The diners were leaving. Zarkon had vanished along with the rest of the universe. The time turbines were preparing to pull the restaurant back across the brink of time in readiness for the lunch sitting, and Max Quadlupline was back in his small curtained dressing room trying to raise his agent on the tempophone. In the parking lot stood the black ship, closed and silent. Into the parking lot came the late Mr. Hotblack Desiato, propelled along the moving catwalk by his bodyguard. They descended one of the tubes as they approached the limo ship. A hatchway swung down from its side, engaged the wheels of the wheelchair, and drew it inside. The bodyguard followed, and having seen his boss safely connected up to his death support system, moved up to the small cockpit. Here he operated the remote control system, which activated the autopilot in the black ship lying next to the limo, thus causing great relief to Zaphod Beeblebrox, who had been trying to start the thing for over 10 minutes. The black ship glided smoothly forward out of its bay, turned and moved down the central causeway swiftly and quietly. At the end, it accelerated rapidly, flung itself into the temporal launch chamber, and began the long journey back into the distant past. The Milky Way's lunch menu quotes, by permission, a passage from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The passage is this: the history of every major galactic civilization tends to pass through 3 distinct and recognizable phases: those of survival, inquiry, and sophistication, otherwise known as the how, why, and where phases. For instance, the first phase is characterized by the question, how can we eat? The second by the question, why do we eat? And the third by the question, where shall we have lunch? The menu goes on to suggest that Millie's, the restaurant at the end of the universe, would be a very agreeable and sophisticated answer to that third question. What it doesn't go on to say is that though it will usually take a large civilization many thousands of years to pass through the how, why, and where phases, small social groupings under stressful conditions can pass through them with extreme rapidity. "How are we doing?" said Arthur Dent. "Badly," said Ford Prefect. "Where are we going?" said Trillian. "I don't know," said Zaphod Beeblebrox. "Why not?" demanded Arthur Dent. "Shut up," suggested Zaphod Beeblebrox and Ford Prefect. "Basically, what you're trying to say," said Arthur Dent, ignoring the suggestion, "is that we're out of control." The ship was rocking and swaying sickeningly as Ford and Zaphod tried to wrest control from the autopilot. The engines howled and whined like tired children in a supermarket. "It's the wild color scheme that freaks me," said Zaphod, whose love affair with the ship had lasted almost 3 minutes into flight. "Every time you try to operate one of these weird black controls that are labeled in black on a black background, a little black light lights up black to let you know that you've done it. What is this? Some kind of galactic hyperhearse?" The walls of the swaying cabin were also black. The ceiling was black, the seats, which were rudimentary, since the only important trip this ship was designed for was supposed to be unmanned, were black. The control panel was black, the instruments were black, the little screws that held them in place were black, the thin, tufted nylon floor covering was black, and when they had lifted up a corner of it, they had discovered that the foam underlay was also black. "Perhaps whoever designed it had eyes that responded to different wavelengths," offered Trillian. "Or didn't have much of imagination," muttered Arthur. "Perhaps," said Marvin. "Oh wait, perhaps," said Marvin. He was feeling very depressed. In fact, though, they weren't to know it. The door had been chosen in honor of its owner's sad, lamented, and tax-deductible condition. The ship had a particularly sickening lurch. "Take it easy." Sorry. "Take it easy." I can't say it without sounding like Nacho Libre. "Take it easy," pleaded Arthur. "You're making me space sick. Time sick," said Ford. "We're plummeting backward through time." "Thank you," said Arthur. "Now I think I really am going to be ill." "Go ahead," said Zaphod. "You could do with a little color about the place." "This is meant to be a polite after-dinner conversation, is it?" snapped Arthur. Zaphod left the controls to Ford to figure out, and lurched over to Arthur. "Look, Earthman," he said angrily, "you've got a job to do, right? Question of the ultimate answer, right?" "What, that thing?" said Arthur. "I thought we'd forgotten about that." "Not me, baby. Like the mice said, it's worth a lot of money in the right quarters. And it's all locked up in that head thing of yours." "Yes, but nothing. Think about it. The meaning of life. We get our fingers on that. We get our fingers on that. We can hold every shrink in the galaxy up to ransom, and that's worth a bundle. I owe mine a mint." Arthur took a deep breath without much enthusiasm. "All right," he said, "but where do we start?" "How should I know?" They say the ultimate answer, or whatever, is 42. How am I supposed to know what the question is? Could be anything. I mean, what's 6 times 7? Zaphod looked at him hard for a moment, and his eyes blazed with excitement. 42! He cried. Arthur wiped his palm across his forehead. Yes, he said impatiently. I know that. Zaphod's faces fell. I'm just saying the question could be anything at all, said Arthur, and I don't see what I meant or how I meant to know. Because, hissed Zaphod, you were there when your planet did the big firework. We have a thing on Earth, began Arthur. Had, corrected Zaphod, called tact. Oh, never mind. Look, I just don't know. A low voice echoed dully around the cabin. I know, said Marvin. Ford called out from the controls he was still fighting a losing battle with. Stay out of this, Marvin, he said. This is organism talk. It's printed in the Earthman's brainwave patterns, continued Marvin. But I don't suppose you'll be very interested in knowing that. You mean, said Arthur, you mean that you can see into my mind? Yes, said Marvin. Arthur stared in astonishment. And, he said, it amazes me how you can manage to live in anything that small. Ah, said Arthur. Abuse! Yes, confirmed Marvin. Ah, ignore him, said Zaphod. He's only making it up. Making it up, said Marvin, swiveling his head in a parody of astonishment. Why should I want to make anything up? Life's bad enough as it is without wanting to invent any more of it. Marvin, said Trillian in a gentle, kindly voice that only she was still capable of assuming in talking to this misbegotten creature. If you knew all along, why then didn't you tell us? Marvin's head swiveled back to her. You didn't ask, he said simply. Well, we're asking, you know, Metal Man, said Ford, turning round to look at him. At that moment, the ship suddenly stopped rocking and swaying. The engine pitch settled down to a gentle hum. Hey, Ford, said Zaphod. That sounds good. Have you worked out the controls on this boat? No, said Ford. I just stopped fiddling with them. I reckon we just go to wherever this ship is going and get off it fast. Yeah, right, said Zaphod. I could tell you weren't really interested, I could tell you weren't really interested, murmured Marvin to himself, and slumped into a corner and switched himself off. Trouble is, said Ford, that the one instrument in this whole ship that is giving any reading is worrying me, sorry. If it is what I think it is, and if it's saying what I think it's saying, then we've already gone too far back into the past, maybe as much as 2 million years before our own time. Zaphod shrugged. Time is bunk, he said. I wonder who this ship belongs to anyway, said Arthur. Me, said Zaphod. No, who it really belongs to. Really me, insisted Zaphod. Look, property is theft, right? Therefore theft is property. Therefore the ship is mine, okay? Tell the ship that, said Arthur. Zaphod strode over to the console. Ship, he said, hanging on the panels. This is your new order, or your new owner speaking to you. He got no further. Several things happened at once. The ship dropped out of time travel mode and re-emerged into real space. All the controls on the console, which had been shut down for the time trip, now lit up. A large vision screen above the console winked into life, revealing a wide starscape and a single very large sun dead ahead of them. None of these things, however, were responsible for the fact that Zaphod was at the same moment hurled bodily against the rear of the cabin, as were all the others. They were hurled back by a single thunderous clap of noise that thudded out of the monitor speakers surrounding the vision screen. Chapter 21, I'm going to stop right here because your boy is sleepy and I get worse at reading the more tired I am. So, yes, we will be back to this soon. Namaste. I love you guys. I'll talk to you in a bit.